This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Lee Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. It is finally here. NBA Media Day. All of the hooping and hollering, the opportunity for media to have a chance, have a go at their favorite boys of the fall, to ask them.
Did she say have a go?
Have a go. Have a go.
All right.
As you can hear, my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Shaw, had to chime in.
You caught me off guard. You caught me off guard with that one, brother. You caught me off guard with that one. So not to ruin our normal intro, man. But yeah, man, Media Day is here.
Sometimes you got to shake things up, man. How long have we been doing this?
Yeah, right.
I mean, listen, at some point, I gotta help us break character every now and again. Maybe this was one way to do it.
Well, you definitely broke character for me, man.
Yeah, okay, good.
Media Day was live. It was live. It was alive and well, and a lot of excitement, a lot of canned answers, but we got the real from some stuff as well too. And I want to share my experience as I got a chance to get to Miami Heat Media Day, as I often get to do. But so much other news has permeated, throughout the NBA ethos in the last couple of weeks. So we got to get to all of that too before we put the shine on the Media Day coverage, as always.
Absolutely, man. And as always, we appreciate everybody for hopping on board with us and, rolling with us for as long as we've been doing it. Obviously, this embarks our 13th season, Shaw, I believe. Yeah, mm-hmm. 13 seasons of doing the Baseline NBA podcast, every year, aside from all of the craziness that takes place with the NBA, man, one thing that's always maintained is our ability to, be here to discuss it, to bring perspective, and to bring people, when the opportunities present themselves, to bring people on and help them, bring perspective, shed light, bring insight. And for us to be doing it this long again, man, it's been a blessing. And as always, man, we appreciate our people who have been rolling with us, whether you're from day one or day none, being a part of this journey for us, covering and discussing everything happening, not just in the association, but in the culture of basketball as well, too. So as always, be sure to get at my man Shaw, at Shaw Sports NBA, get at me at GameFace Lee, the show's Twitter handle, at NBA Baseline. And also you can catch us www.thebaselinenba.com to catch not just this episode, but also all of the episodes that we have archived in the Batcave. If you see us on YouTube and you see the blue and white logo, then that means we're rolling with the 19 Media Group family. So be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to check us and also the great content creators, 19 Media Group, be running these content streets. So before we get into, things are going on Media Day, we got a lot of stuff that we got to get into. Obviously, there's some news and notes that have come down the pipe. Big trade happening up here in the Big Apple. A major player who's been really one of our generational follows in the NBA decides to call it quits. We recognize the passing of an iconic player of our generation as well, too. And then, we got a lot of stuff to talk about with regards to Media Day, and also be able to kind of do a little FaceTime with the Baseline with our own host, our man Shaw, and his opportunity in doing and being part of Miami Heat Media Day. So we got so much to get into, and again, man, it's always great to have the opportunity to sit down and chop it up and really kind of get ourselves primed up and ready before we're getting ready for NBA tip-off. So before we get into that, got to pay some bills. And in doing so, are you ready to elevate your fantasy sports experience? With Prize Picks, you can win up to 100 times your money. Imagine turning a $10 entry into a whopping $1,000. With all the sports taking place right now, there's no better time to get in on the action. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week, from lowering select players' stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Football is back. Both baseball and women's basketball are in the postseason. Prize Picks is the best way for you to mix and match your selections across all of the sports. Shaw and I grew up playing baseball, so we like to mix in a little variety with our picks in America's pastime. We like to pick players maybe like Bobby Witt Jr. or Asia Wilson and Tyreek Hill. And with those type of selections, you can win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. And for those who like a quick win, Prize Picks is definitely the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Plus, with quick withdrawals and an enormous selection of players and stat types, it's no wonder Prize Picks is the go-to app for fantasy sports. So what are you waiting for? Download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's right. Prize Picks will match your deposit and give you more to play with. Remember, with Prize Picks, it's as simple as picking more or picking less. So let's get those entries in and watch the winnings roll. It's that easy. Don't forget to use promo code CLNS to get your deposit match, and stay tuned for more basketball insights right here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Let's play and win together with Prize Picks. Coming up, Sean and I get right into things happening in the association, and we also got Media Day, so you don't want to go away. All right. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. And as we get right into the thick of things, Shaw, obviously the big news that came down the pipeline was the trade taking place, or is still, in its final stages, if it hasn't already been finalized. Karl-Anthony Towns has been moved from the Minnesota Timberwolves to the New York Knicks in exchange for Julius Randle, Donte DiVincenzo, first-round pick, and then also involved in the trade, the Charlotte Hornets will receive DaQuan Jeffries and a future draft pick for compensation. Look, I think the biggest question is, what kind of impact is DaQuan Jeffries going to have for the Charlotte Hornets?
You in rare form. You're in rare form.
Because we all know the insignificance of Karl-Anthony Towns coming to the New York Knicks. We should temper, Knicks fans' enthusiasm about them getting the big cat in the Big Apple.
I can only imagine what it's like for you, living in the Jersey, obviously the New York metropolitan area. Knicks fans they're already, counting rings from my account. But there are a lot of people who are dubious about it as well too.
Can I enlighten you on something? So from the feel that I've gotten from quite a few people, they're very hesitant about this move.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. Now, Shaw, my perspectives tend to, go in other places that I think that maybe their minds might not even have considered. And that doesn't mean right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just saying I look at things, in a completely different and abstract way, as someone who does try to follow the game and follow what's going on and the dynamics and where a player fits and what is taking place here. But I'm really curious from your perspective, Shaw. What do you think the New York Knicks were addressing by feeling it necessary for them to make this play in bringing Karl-Anthony Towns onto their roster?
Locking in somebody, a true 5-man because of the Mitchell Robinson continued injuries and not really sure what he was going to be able to do, when he was going to be able to do whatever that is this season and kind of even beyond. And then the question of Randle, would he fit in to what it was kind of quote unquote the Nova Knicks, but now they get rid of some of that with Donte DiVincenzo also going in the deal, to Minnesota. But they didn't want to pay Randle. That's really what this boils down to. As good as he was as a Knick, and yes, he had some times where he was kind of beefing with the crowd and the audience and the fan base there, so to speak. But he was a good basketball player, but they didn't see him as the transformative piece, if you will, to be Robin to Jalen Brunson's Batman. They just didn't see that. And as a result, they didn't want to have to pony up $40-50 million to pay Randle that amount, especially with him being a true 4. And, they were going to play him at some small ball 5 this year. That wasn't a long-term goal for that. In Cat, what it boils down to is that if and when Mitchell Robinson comes back, it allows him the flexibility. Cat has played the 4, especially in these last couple of years alongside Rudy Gobert. But if Mitchell Robinson doesn't materialize, it allows Cat to play the 5 full-time, which he did for the majority part of his career as well, too. And he's already under contract. That gives the Knicks a lot of flexibility. They still have some assets despite giving up all the stuff that they've given up in the Mikal Bridges and now the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. But now they're a destination as well too. I mean, they've always been a destination, but now they're a destination with a purpose. With a winning team, a coach, and a centerpiece in Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns that should have the Knicks competing in the Eastern Conference for the foreseeable future.
I struggle with this because every point that you made, Shaw, totally and absolutely makes sense. And I think somewhere along the lines, I would have been completely on board with a move like this if the New York Knicks hadn't already altered arguably 3/4 of their roster already in before they even got to this trade.
Sure.
And I think that the bigger question that I always have when teams do things like this is, are you overdoing it? Right? Like, if you're structuring your roster the way that you're structuring it because you feel like the road through to the Eastern Conference Finals, the NBA Finals, is through the Boston Celtics, through the Milwaukee Bucks, through whatever. And obviously you put your roster together that you feel like is best suited to counter what the other teams are presenting. And I said to myself, what the New York Knicks had established with the Nova crew is something that was very reflective of what was lacking for the other teams other than the Boston Celtics that they had the ability to exhibit, which is the determination, the will. These are metrics and intangibles at times that I just don't think you can put numbers to, right? The fight in them, right? When your star player wants to step up and have those kind of iconic performances, knowing you've got a guy like that on that roster and that you got guys that actually elevate themselves playing next to that type of player. And I always keep wondering to myself with a move like this, when it comes to Karl-Anthony Towns, is Karl-Anthony Towns that kind of guy that's going to get up when Jalen Brunson elevates his play? Look, Karl-Anthony Towns to me is naturally a really quality offensive player. I think he has had to learn to become a better player defensively. And I think in many respects, playing next to a Rudy Gobert, as much as we don't, care for Rudy Gobert, and I'm sure amongst his contemporaries, they see him as Fugazi. But the fact of the matter is that as a big, as a tall, the blocks he gets, the way that he plays, and everything like that, some of it has had to rub off on the Minnesota Timberwolves for the Timberwolves to be one of the best teams in the NBA defensively, right? It couldn't have just only been Anthony Edwards. There had to be contributions even being made by Karl-Anthony Towns. I just wonder if whether or not this is, again, the Knicks overdoing it. Like, you made that sacrifice to get Mikal Bridges. You ponied up the money for OG Anunoby, right? Now you're saying you're going to get Karl-Anthony Towns. And I'm just wondering, is it more because you're saying you see him more as to be the number 2 to Jalen Brunson? So to hell with these other two guys who arguably left their respective teams or were completely fine that their respective teams were getting rid of them when they have more than enough opportunities for themselves to be number ones where they are after the dynamic change, the shift changes that took place. With OG Anunoby is a little different because he couldn't stay healthy. But had he stayed healthy and actually was on the court a lot for the Toronto Raptors, they probably wouldn't have needed to make the moves they made in order to get RJ Barrett and guys like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's just interesting to me the way that this next roster is set up. I find it very interesting, because they didn't even give an opportunity for the previous roster they had for like the offseason to breathe for them to determine Karl-Anthony Towns needs to be that guy next to Jalen Brunson.
Well, they apparently have been circling the Karl-Anthony Towns conversation for a little while. So for us, it's one of those things like, well, usually there's buildup and we see it kind of coming. We just didn't know, but apparently it had been rumored for a little bit of time here now. And I think the biggest part of this is the Knicks' kind of miraculous run without Julius Randle. I think to the most initiated NBA fans would have said like, all right, plug in Julius and we're good to go. But I don't know how much the Mitchell Robinson injury necessitated this. I don't know how accelerant it actually put on this getting done now. I was a little surprised, as I'm sure were the Knicks. I mean, I'm sure it was Karl-Anthony Towns. But it's interesting because you're talking about it. I thought about it briefly a couple days ago when it was announced. I was like, yeah, are they tweaking too much? Are they just tinkering before they really know what the formula is? And then I think of a team like Boston last year where, hey, stuff became available. They make the Kristaps Porzingis move. That was a team that, hey, it went to a conference finals, lost in game 7 for sure, but it went to a conference finals and was in the finals the year previous to that. They get rid of Marcus Smart. They get rid of Robert Williams, core pieces to that to get Porzingis in, and then Drew Holiday kind of falls in their laps. So I think from the Knicks perspective, they're looking at exactly what Boston did. Is like, hey, you know what? We keep kind of like these 2-3 pieces in place. But to your point, that Jalen Brunson is the real piece to this right now. And I guess Josh Hart and Anunoby missed most of the playoff run last year. Mikal Bridges is now coming into this as well. So, and again, the off-injured Mitchell Robinson, it's a very, very unique situation because the Knicks might be tinkering a little bit too much. But before you jump in, it's the other side for me, Minnesota. You finally had a run, an extended run. He knocked off the defending champs to make it into the Western Conference Finals for the first time in 20 years. And now all of a sudden, no, that's it, because they're trying to dump salary. And now Randle could or may not stay with them after this year. But it's I know they're a small or mid-market team, but I don't know what it says to that fan base that you make the Western Conference Finals and then you make a change, with a roster that you didn't really let it breathe at all. Both teams are doing the most here, but by most people's accounts, the Knicks are winning this trade. But I think, as you alluded to, it remains to be seen on paper.
Yeah. So final point, because obviously there's a couple of things we want to get into before we start talking about, media day. To your point, Shaw, it is unfortunate. And I think this is, and I think I was listening to Alan Hahn on ESPN radio, actually earlier this morning, as we were recording this podcast. He alluded to the fact, he said, now we're going to really start beginning to see why people really hate this nuance added into the CBA agreement regarding the apron tier impacting teams. He said, it may have been nice to say, okay, well, this is a way to kind of dissuade people, the teams who are just constantly, overpaying on the luxury tax hit that they were taking, like the Golden State Warriors, and maybe even say like the Boston Celtics, because they have the money to and want to go ahead and do it. But at the same time, what I would challenge people in what they're understanding here is that this again is a reflection of a company or an organization that doesn't understand what sustainable success should look like, or should feel like, or should mean. And so what I mean by that, Shaw, is if you're the Minnesota Timberwolves and this is not just what you got last year. This is what you've kind of been seeing evolve over the last few seasons, right? And what it tells me is that they just don't know how to do this. Even if that caveat wasn't there, the fact that they don't make it work with the kind of players that they have accumulated, assets they accumulated, and what they were doing, so that the players themselves, the coaches themselves, have an opportunity to prove. You don't break something like this up. You know how many times have we seen in the past, Shaw, when the Memphis Grizzlies probably should have had losing records, and they figured out a way with the guys that they had to be successful, like in the early 2000s, mid 2010s, right? Like they were good for a sustained period of time. A lot of it was coaching, a lot of it was the players, right? The grit and grind era, the way that they committed to it would have made any small market owner really feel pressured. Like, if I still want to continue to own this team, I gotta pony up the money. We gotta see this thing through. And even though they never won a championship, they had quite a bit, good stretch of success, where even now in this era of Ja Morant, despite Ja Morant's immaturity, the Memphis Grizzlies were a viable team that showed what success looks like. And I look at this and I say to myself, yeah, the Knicks are going to be okay, but the Knicks are on this other level of, crazy expectations. Whereas the Minnesota Timberwolves, if this team winds up having a losing record, we're looking at this and saying, yeah, you did this to yourself because you were afraid of something ultimately that is going to have a much longer setback for the organization and for players who actually want to play for you, like Anthony Edwards, because of how you went about doing this. And I think that to me is the unfortunate part of this all, because you're looking at Anthony Edwards and people are trying to make comparisons of him being like the next Jordan and stuff. How do you, how do you, how do you reconcile that with a player like himself? You know what I'm saying? This ain't the Bulls of you know what I'm saying, the 1980s. That's not what we're living in right now. When a player sees something like that, it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
All I can say from the Minnesota standpoint is like, you feel like, hey, Randall's a more natural four than maybe Cat is. The spacing, though, is going to be wonky because Randall, while he can shoot threes, isn't a prolific 3-point shooter. Karl-Anthony Towns did have the ability to really space the floor and be a viable threat out there on a regular basis that allowed Rudy to operate inside some. I do like the acquisition of DiVincenzo. It probably hurts the ability for their rookie Rob Dillingham to get plus minutes in this system, unless another injury occurs, unfortunately. So for the Minnesota side, it's an interesting move. I don't think it's the power play that they're hoping. I don't think it keeps them at the same level that they think they're hoping it will, but they'll still be competitive in the Western Conference. But I'd be, at this point, to be surprised if they make another Western Conference Finals run with this roster that's currently constructed. But back to New York, as we started, with Tibbs, they have history. Karl-Anthony Towns and Tibbs does. This roster, this organization is believing in, and this is what we're 2 years removed from thinking Tibbs might have to go. And now he seems to be putting his stamp on this team, and now bringing in, an all-star, even all-NBA caliber player and Cat, to pair alongside Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges. This Knicks team on paper, hey, they're going to be interesting to watch, if nothing else. And they have the opening night game against the defending champion Boston Celtics.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, the depth, though, we'll see what the Knicks do. But from a depth perspective, they're very slim, very slim. So we'll see how they fill out the way that the roster will fill itself out, for them, because as good as they look as a starting five, what happens after that is that that's going to be kind of the big question mark for this team. Sure. Going through the rest of the season. Joel Embiid, he's been given an extension. I guess the Philadelphia 76ers want to make sure that they put a smile on his face, outside of getting him Paul George. Are we good with the idea that, I mean, he's not like it isn't deserved. Joel Embiid is arguably the best center in the game. So
yeah. No, there's nothing wrong, I think, with making the extension. But when you look at what Philadelphia has done this summer alone, right? So they were supposed to pay Maxey, or not, I should say supposed to, but they had the opportunity to pay Maxey last fall. They waited, they gambled, so they'd have the cap flexibility to be able to do all of this. So they pay Maxey $200 million or whatever. They give Paul George $200 million, and now they give Joel Embiid $193 million. It gets them there to 2028-2029 season. The Sixers are all in. They're all in.
Yeah, they have no choice. They have no choice.
No, and like I said, I think with Embiid, he's a generational type player, the best center in the NBA, a perennial MVP candidate. Now that he's gotten one, now he does have to prioritize his health and trying to win an NBA championship. I have no problem with the extension. I know there's some people will just say, well, he plays 60 games a year, always breaks down in the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd ask you, what would you do? I'd say you can't let him walk. You're not trading him. It's like you pay. It's par for the course. And you just, hope and pray that you finally get a season, especially with the reinforcements that you have now with PG there, that you can keep them healthy for the entirety of the season so that they can have the playoff run that we all think is coming. And further proof of this, my last comment is that this goes back. We just talked about the Knicks, talking about Philadelphia here now. Nobody's afraid of that Boston team. I feel like we say it all the time. Yes, they're defending champs. Nobody's afraid of them, and that's why we're seeing these gargantuan moves. They know they need to match up to beat them, but nobody's thinking like, we can't do that. And I think that's what's really interesting about this NBA right now.
Well, and I think and we'll, obviously have opportunity to speak about this when we break down, what rosters are going to look like and teams are going to look like as, we try to preview out the conferences and stuff. I think the dynamic has really changed as well too, Shaw, that like the mentality of the fear factor. I think that the way that the NBA is set up right now, this is not from a roster perspective as much as it is from a personnel perspective, right? Like in other words, the type of players that are paired up that are making, what the roster is comprised of, I think is where it kind of reflects that level of intimidation. Like in other words, when Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, like it's not like they've never had to deal with Joel Embiid, right? Right? They understand that. They understand the assignment. They understand that Joel Embiid is one of the best big men in the game, and yet they figured out a way with the rosters that they've had to best the Philadelphia 76ers. Matter of fact, Philadelphia 76ers are allergic to the Boston Celtics when it comes to playing up against them. And we had this conversation just, off the air, Shaw, that I think the mentality is different now with this modern NBA about your approach to how you deal with your rivals or how you deal with, your contemporaries. We're just not living in that era where, Patrick Ewing loved Michael Jordan as a brother, but hated his ass every single time that he wound up playing him on the basketball court. You know what I'm saying? And Jordan knew that. There's very few players that come in with that kind of mindset and mentality, because everybody again is looking at like, well, we don't fear the team. But no, don't worry about the team. Worry about the players. Worry about the players on that roster. You know what I'm saying? It isn't about just the logo or the history of the Celtics. We're beyond that because the NBA has changed that dynamic. It's the players that you worry more about, that you either respect or you disrespect. You know what I'm saying? And so it'll be interesting to see what version of Joel Embiid comes out there on the basketball court. Because I'm going to say this right now, Shaw. It's great that he got his extension. Probably he was smart to take it. But if you're the Philadelphia 76ers, you're talking about winning, you seriously need to start thinking about how your roster is constructed that is going to extend Joel Embiid's ability to be on the basketball court, to be fully healthy when the time presents itself that he needs to be playing at his best. And you look at like what the Minnesota Timberwolves did in having guys like a Naz Reid, which is probably one of the reasons why they said, okay, we may lose Karl-Anthony Towns, but we have depth. We've got players in different positions and we can mix and match and play. And I think, they believe that they can hold their own where they can still be competitive. They just won't have a Karl-Anthony Towns because you got a bulldog in Anthony Edwards, and that was always going to be the case. So it'll be interesting to see what Joel Embiid really is doing in this offseason and what he's going to eventually come NBA tip-off time is, because as much as we're going to be in awe of what numbers he's going to decide to put up, when the time presents itself, we're still going to always believe that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are going to best him. We're still going to always believe that whatever Joel Embiid plays alongside, whoever plays alongside him, are not going to be good enough to play against the likes of a Giannis Antetokounmpo or the Boston Celtics, or maybe even the Miami Heat, because we've seen what those other players have done in those particular moments, which is something that Joel Embiid continues to fall short on.
It's put up or shut up time, I think, for Embiid and the Sixers. Best opportunity to win NBA championship, this year. Paul George said as much in Media Day, which we'll get to in a little bit as well. But yeah, great conversation on the Philadelphia 76ers.
Absolutely, Shaw. You're tuned to the Baseline. Cal Lee Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. One last thing to get into. We are losing a great, great player, one of our generational players that we watched and also had the privilege of sitting down and having conversations and doing interviews with. The rose that grew from the Chicago concrete, Derrick Rose, has decided to call it a career. So people are aware he made his announcement on Instagram, and it is really remarkable the way that in this social media age, how people now like to pay their respects or give their flowers to players and stuff like that. Like I've never seen this many people, even celebrities and all like, which really tells you how beloved Derrick Rose was. but it's pretty remarkable. He had a phenomenal NBA career, and probably, if not injuries that had ravaged him throughout the course of his time as an NBA player, who knows, like how juiced those numbers could actually be for him, when it comes to scoring and everything. But he was even a quality off the bench player. He was a quality guy for his teammates, such a veteran presence. He's going to be missed. I know that there's definitely teams who probably wish they could have a Derrick Rose on their roster, especially playoff contending teams that we'll probably be talking about. Wish that he would still have one more year left to give him. But even he understood the writing on the wall of what his body is just not going to allow him to be able to do. And it just really sucks, man. But during his time, man, you couldn't find a more athletically gifted player with so much fire in him to be the best during those years that he was a Chicago Bull, man. He was a beast. He was a straight up beast.
Yeah, definitely one of the NBA's what if stories. If he'd been healthy, we've been robbed of so many great players because of the injuries that they've had to endure. Yeah, he struggled with, I think, some off the court stuff, midway through his career, but it really has kind of bounced back. And then when it comes to his career, like, I lament the aspect of what he was brought to Memphis to do last year, he didn't get to do. At least not in the way that I think, most people would have thought. Yes, he was still around John Morant and so forth, but Morant then gets injured. And I really would have wanted to see what it was like, the on-court chemistry. And I don't know what Derrick's relationship ended up being like, but I just feel like it's probably got cut short, especially because they didn't really get to overlap like that. And D Rose ultimately deciding to retire. As we've been talking about, kind of hinting at throughout the entire of the show, I was at media today. Going to play a quick clip from Jimmy Butler, who was asked about D Rose, and you can hear Jimmy's kind of respect for Derrick Rose, in this clip here at NBA at Miami Heat Media Day.
You obviously overlap with D Rose in Chicago, and he just recently retired. Yeah. What do you think about his legacy of his career?
I think what he's done for the game of basketball, what he's done for the city of Chicago, for the organization, the Chicago Bulls, and for myself, I think we should all be grateful that we got the opportunity to compete against him. I got to compete with him, be a coach and get to learn from him as a whole, man. When I was coming to the league at 21, he was the man. He put so much fear in so many other individuals' eyes. To watch his career come to an end, I'm happy for him because he is happy. He's going on to do whatever he wants to do, but he ended it the way he wanted to.
And I love the fact, what Jimmy said there. Jimmy was actually very reflective, just kind of in general, in that moment at Heat Media Day, but just the aspect of players going out on their own proverbial terms. And I think you alluded to the fact that D Rose probably could be continuing to play and mentor guys. He'd be welcomed in that state. But ultimately he decided that it's enough for him. And even what he did, I think, was very classy. He took out an ad at Chicago Tribune. We all know print media is a dying media. So even that last gesture to kind of do something for the city, for a newspaper that's covered him for as many years as he did, in addition to what he did on social media, I thought that was classy on his end. And I don't think he did that on accident by any stretch of the imagination.
No, there's always, I think there's always a purpose, and an intent. And that it was always one of the things, like, I got harken back. I want to say it was 2010. I had an opportunity to sit down with Derrick Rose. This was fresh off of him winning the Rookie of the Year, because he won MVP in 2010, 2011. And this was for, covering, I think it was the NBA 2K game being released, and, they were featuring him on the cover. And he just fresh off of watching his Bulls team, get knocked out in the playoffs and stuff like that. While he was humble, you could clearly tell he was seething, just chomping at the bit for him to get back into the gym. Like, he didn't have to spend time, sitting here doing an interview with me, talking about a video game, but he was there. He was definitely engaged in it. He knows he's fulfilling obligations. It's the heyday of where these branding is becoming big, especially for the players. But when you sit down, and you actually spoke with him, his heart, his mind, everything about him was always about the work, was always about the grind, the ultimate goal. I think the one thing that he probably wished that he was able to do with his brothers Luol Deng and Joakim Noah and those guys, that he wished that he had gotten them a chip, or gotten them an opportunity, to win that chip. And they had some really solid teams. I'm sure that he wished that he was at 100%, because if he was, the likelihood is they would have been playing in one of those NBA finals. And that's one of the things that I take away from, and I'm sure that that's what, Jimmy Butler in some regard, in some respects was alluding to as it pertains to the life of Derrick Rose, and what he meant, the life force that he brought into the NBA, because he was just a different breed of a player. Whatever his shortcomings were, he figured out a way to not make it his shortcomings and actually use it as a strength. He improved on so many different levels in so many different ways. The only thing that he couldn't improve on is being able to stay as healthy for the way that he wanted to play the game, the way that he attacked the game. And it never deterred from his ability to play the game, the ferocity. Before we had Russell Westbrook, there was Derrick Rose, and to me, that just speaks volumes of, the kind of player that he was. And again, man, like he was a monster. He was an absolute monster.
Couldn't say it better myself, man. And we wish D Rose all the best, in his journeys ahead, whatever he ultimately wants to do. I don't suspect we'll be seeing a whole lot of him. He's a quiet individual guy, wants to be a family man. Have to completely respect that. But whatever he does pop out, he will be lauded and applauded for everything he's contributed to the game.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we got to do a little NBA media talk. Hopefully, I won't get my man Shaw to chuckle too hard this time. But definitely got to get into that, man. And we also got to speak about the passing of one of the greatest centers to play the game of basketball. So you do not want to miss out. But first, if you're craving nonstop hoop action, NBA League Pass is your ticket to the ultimate basketball experience. Enjoy live games, on-demand replays, and exclusive behind-the-scenes content across a variety of devices. With NBA League Pass, you'll get more games. We're talking regular season and select playoff matchups, more features, including multi-view angles, in-depth stats, and behind-the-scenes stories. More access. Catch your favorite teams and players anytime, anywhere. Stay up with the NBA like The Baseline does. League Pass is for fans who live the game. Sign up now. NBA season is just right around the corner. So if you want to get your fill, you got to get in on it now. Sign up now at link.nba.com/LP19MG. That's link.nba.com/LP19MG. More Baseline. Cal Lee, don't go away. We're back. Cal Lee Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast. Time to get into a little NBA Media Day. That time of the year. It's like Thanksgiving before Christmas. So take what you will of that. But anyway, NBA Media Day, Shaw, players are coming back, reporting, for duty, so to speak. Some of them live for it. Some of them don't. And obviously you yourself, you take part in NBA Media Day, specifically for the Miami Heat. Enlighten us a little bit on, what that experience was like, what the vibe was like. Did Jimmy Butler go emo, like he did last year? What went down for you down in Miami?
Yeah, this year in Miami, it was a different vibe, a different situation. This Heat team is not under the same level of scrutiny. They don't have the same expectations, and they don't have the same drama. And all that was reflected, I think, even the amount of media that was there. It was a little bit subdued. I almost felt like I was in a small market situation. And we know the Miami Heat, even if they are a mid-sized market, if you will, they're considered a large scale market. And they've performed like a large market team. Like they've just had a lot of success, but there just wasn't the same overall energy around the team this year. And that's not a knock. Some people might think that it just wasn't. There wasn't as much media. There wasn't as much fanfare, kind of going into it. They were really kind of more about the business. And maybe for the rest of the Eastern Conference, you kind of put on notice. Spo was asked a question by Ira Winderman early in his media availability about all the changes in the Eastern Conference, which we've touched on even before getting into this segment. Philadelphia, New York. Ira even mentioned Orlando, et cetera, et cetera. And Spo was like, "Yeah, Ira, you seem scared." Like that's what he says. Like, you seem scared, but you have to be about this. And he's like, we're not running from anybody. That is a quote unquote maybe a typical answer from most coaches at this time of the year, especially going in, not really knowing what everything is. But when Erik Spoelstra says it, I believe him. I don't think they are afraid, and they do feel like, as they say here in Miami, they feel like they have enough. They just need Terry Rozier to be healthy, need Tyler Herro to be healthy, Jimmy Butler to play more than 55, 60 games this year. All of those things happen. This Heat team is going to be problematic. They got a great young rookie in Kelly Ware. They add some nice additions. I spoke to Alec Burks on the side. I spoke to Nasir Little on the side. These are veteran guys with a lot of talent. And now they're just going to be, quote unquote, and I want to say just, but they'll be rotation players for a very talented Heat team. So while the fanfare, if you will, about this was subdued, it sent to me that this is more about business. And the players, and most players don't really love media day. They don't like really talking and doing all that jive anyway. But I got a sense from some guys who are like, all right, man, we're just trying to get to this. We're flying to the Bahamas to go do some team bonding tomorrow, and we're about to get into this work. And I can appreciate that from this Heat organization, who's been very gracious to me here at 19 Media Group and the Baseline NBA podcast. I've been going there for years and years and years and years. But that's the vibe I got from there. No antics, no drama, straight business.
Yeah, I mean, we often, I think that when it comes to the Miami Heat and it comes to media day, and this is part of the par for the course for the culture, right? They've just set this standard that, guys need to be about that work. And I don't know if whether or not, there was like any kind of conversation, maybe, you might speak more to it and stuff like that. But, the version that, was presented of Jimmy Butler, and you actually, played a clip a little while ago about him, taking the time out to address, Derrick Rose, which was a great opportunity to do that, because I think, most people, when it comes to media day in any sport, when you're, a superstar athlete or you're a star athlete, you're the man or whatever, you
Right.
take advantage of that, right? Like you kind of make yourself the center of attention for a little bit. And sometimes you do it intentionally because you want to take the pressure off of the rookies. You want to take pressures off of coaches and things of that nature. Like they're willing to soak in and be the center of attention to the media people, so that these guys can actually just kind of breathe, because they know that this is going to be a marathon, right? Having to deal with the onslaught of media and the blitz of questions through the course of the year while your team is going through its ebbs and flows, right? So I think it's really interesting that, to your point, when it comes to the Miami Heat, there's this level of consistency, even when you have enigmatic stars like a Jimmy Butler on there. And you also get to see the maturation process of some of these guys as well, too. You know what I'm saying? Like, you really do get to see, like, no one stays the same from year to year. Something will impact what approach they're going to have coming into the next media day for the next season. Whether it's from injury, whether it's from a bitter loss in the playoffs, whether it's your team basically, has accumulated the worst record in NBA history. Like, something is going to trigger the mentality that you want to have. And that's what sets that tone, is how you come into that media day situation and how you're addressing not just the media, but also the virtual fans, right? Because the media speaks for what the fans are going to hear and see. And that sets the tone for what's going to happen for this upcoming season.
Yeah, and Miami is in a situation where they Spo said it best. I think every year I quote Spo probably the most when we talk about it, because I just find him to be such an engaging individual in our NBA environment. But the coaches, to a person, even the new folks, Alec Burks sat down and was like, "Yeah, I came to Miami because I wanted to play with Spo." Nasir Little was like, "Yeah, I came to Miami because they value the things that some of my other teams haven't valued for me. Like, yeah, I know I need to shoot the three more, but Miami's going to value the fact that I'm a hustler and I can do the intangibles and I can rebound." That's all credit to Spo. But when you talk about the Jimmy aspect, one thing that was, from the media standpoint, was annoying, because like, hey, we're on a schedule, people got stories to file, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Jimmy wasn't there initially. right? Like that would, and then I think he was trending on X for a little while, and there was kind of the joke, like you even made it yourself. What hairstyle was Jimmy going to come into? They were taking bets, like, you know, prop bets. Prize Picks probably even had it on their line. It's like, hey, well, what hairstyle will he come in? Will he come in bald or emu or whatever the case may be? He came in normal because he had some real life stuff going on. And that impacted, I think, even what he was able to give us as media members in that moment. He literally got off the plane from wherever he was and came straight to media day, sweat beating down his face on the side, like legitimately, because he was rushing to get there. And he kept saying, listen, I'm happy to be here. You know, just being very reflective. There's so many things going on in life. You don't know what it took for me to get here, you know, in this amount of time, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know, haters will be like, hey, you know what? You know, media day was September 30th. You know, what's the big deal? I'm not going to take that route. I don't know what he was facing, you know, that made him have to go through those trials and tribulations. But nevertheless, he went through them and was there regardless. You know, he gave the media what he had to give, but he was very reflective. And obviously he was asked about his contract situation and what that's going to look like. And he said, listen, I agree with Pat. You know, Riley, I have a lot of respect for Pat Riley. I agree with him. I do need to be available, and I will be available. I'm not worried about the money. I'm just going to be here for my guys and try to win the NBA championship. And I thought that was very big of somebody who was considered to be one of the better leaders in the NBA. And, you know, I think that was a leadership moment for him in that. And final note I'll say on this, Terry Rozier spoke. And, you know, I love my guy, Scary Terry, man. And he was hurt. You know, was hurt for the majority part of his Miami stint last year. And he came out with the biggest chip on his shoulder, my guy. You know, he was just like, I hear the doubters. And I was like, well, who's the doubters? And I mean, we're just getting into the preview phases, but I guess people have been talking and saying Miami has no chance. And that's what he's putting. He's filling up his tank with that narrative. And he's like, listen, I can't wait to get out here and run with Tyler Herro and Jimmy and Bam, and we're going to see what's up. I appreciated that because we know Scary Terry is somebody who's been underappreciated and, you know, undervalued for a large part of his career. And he's kind of getting back to that. And I think, again, that could be scary because he's a very talented basketball player.
He's a talented basketball player. And I'm glad he's speaking like that, because if I'm Jimmy Butler, I need a sidekick. I need a road dog. You know what I mean? And I think that
he's got multiple, right? When you talk about that with Bam and Tyler and sorry, not to interrupt, but I think as you're going into that, it's important. Every one of them was like, and you can say it's coach speak and it's the media day narrative, so forth and so forth. But Tyler admits like, hey, I remember last year saying, hey, I don't feel not wanted, right? Because of the whole Dame Lillard stuff or whatever. He says today, you know, last year I was trying to come in here and I was trying to average 25 a game, you know, because I'm trying to show you. And this year he's like, listen, whatever. And his words, like paraphrasing, but almost verbatim, whatever the best coach in the league wants me to do, and whatever one of the best NBA general managers, GMs of all time wants me to do, I will do. And so the mindset is different for all of them. And I think not having those narratives is an important situation for any team that's trying to have success. We keep talking about Boston here. That was the biggest difference here. When Tatum and Brown stopped pushing and pulling against each other and realized we need to do this together and sacrifice whatever it is, they were able to get over the proverbial hump. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen here in Miami, but at least the situations in terms of all those individual guys, and yes, Jimmy Butler's paying for a contract on top of it, but they're saying all the right things here now to be in line with what the Heat want to do, and that's to be as competitive as possible.
Well, we'll unpack that aspect of competitiveness, because I think when you talk about the Miami Heat, we have to in a way, we have to stop trying to align the Miami Heat of what we're dealing with now with what the Miami Heat has had access to and has presented over the last couple of years, not just in the rivalries against the Boston Celtics, but as how the team was composed in their ability to address exactly the things that you're talking about. Because those elements are, I'm not saying they're no longer there. It's just that they have reshifted. And to your point, and what you were talking about, let's say specifically with Tyler Herro, that to me is what I'm speaking of. Because if you're telling me that Tyler Herro should be a natural scorer in the game, no one's questioning his ability to score. We're questioning his consistency to score. We're questioning his decision-making in his ability to score. He is lacked in, and he's actually regressed in those things. And the person that you want to do more of that seems to always just he does some, doesn't do it all the time, and maybe that's not what is completely expected of him. But now after his experience in the Olympics, may change that tune, right? Like I want to see Bam Bam. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to see Bam. I want to see Bam Bam. I want to see multiple Bam Bam. I think Butler wants to see multiple Bam Bam. And so that's what I'm saying. It'll be interesting to see if this is the kind of dynamic you're speaking of, about how they all are speaking the way that they did at Media Day, if that's what's being translated. Because, again, what we've been seeing over the last couple of years and what happened last year is not about just the numbers as much as it is about the mentality and the approach that those players came into the season and what they gave us when the season ended.
Yeah, you bring up so many good things, and you continue to jog my memory. The last thing I'll say about Tyler was this, because I don't want to say he was humbled as much as he gained perspective, and it was the aspect of like, yeah, they were to steal one game against Boston in that opening round series last year, but he kept alluding to the fact that, like, listen, Derek and Drew, they were on my ass, man, and he got treated like a number one option because of all the injuries. He was the number one option. And dare I say, he didn't like that, or he wasn't prepared for that. So he's been able to kind of be a number two, number three, because there's been other guys there with a larger profile that teams have had to focus on. Take those guys away, and now he's the guy. All right, you're the guy now. That attention was different. That physicality was different. And it provided him perspective that he said, hey, I gained 12 pounds this offseason. It's going to help me kind of, get through some of the rigors of the physicality that the playoffs are going to bring. Yes, I got to worry about, that on my joints or whatever, but like I need to be stronger. I need to be able to handle the rigors of an NBA season and the NBA playoffs. And to me, that perspective, and again, I said I wouldn't say it, but I think in some ways maybe it was humbling, but more than anything else, he understands what he needs to do now, and his personal accolades aren't at the forefront of Miami being successful. That is team basketball that we hope to see kind of throughout. And we wish all teams would exhibit that same type of, that mantra and that attitude.
Absolutely. To add on to what you're talking about, let's just go right back to what happened in the Western Conference Finals with the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? Everybody is saying Anthony Edwards is that guy. And everybody wasn't saying Karl-Anthony Towns wants to be that guy. And what did it literally take to have happen before we got to see what we have always been seeing when it comes to Karl-Anthony Towns? You know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those situations where it literally has to be, everything has to be stripped, bare to the bones, literally, before you begin to expose and see what's left of your skin. You know what I mean? And so that's what I think needed to happen for Tyler Herro, because even if what we said was, Tyler Herro, you go out and you score 30-something points, per game, everyone is still saying this team doesn't do anything without Jimmy Butler. Then it's your responsibility, Tyler, to make people understand that even if Jimmy Butler is not there, we're going to be all right. And it was just one of those situations where you never elevated yourself and you never elevated your teammates to believe in that aspect of it. So it always goes back to, well, this is what this team looks like without having Jimmy Butler on there. And so hopefully this is a learning lesson, but more importantly, this is a proving session, right? Yeah. It's the same conversation that I think happened with Scary Terry, or else Scary Terry would still be a Boston Celtic. They would have never had to revert to Marcus Smart and all these other variations of other guards for what Scary Terry could have potentially have been. It's just that level of inconsistency and where those opportunities didn't present itself. Hopefully he has it now in Miami. But again, you're playing under a different premise, under a different culture. So you can't have the mentality that you had with the Charlotte Hornets. Can't have that mentality that you had with the Boston Celtics. And you as a player, you're not the same player from that time frame either. Not saying that you've taken a step back. I'm just saying your approach to what that team needs and to what is required for you to go out and win games for them has completely shifted. And that means your maturity has to evolve along with that part of it as well, too. And again, it's all very interesting. You know what I'm saying? But it all is done when you listen to how these guys respond, not just to the questions, but also their approach to how they even look at doing something like NBA Media Day when it comes to them giving people at least like some perspective of what were you thinking about, what was going through your mind, what were you doing in the off season to get yourself ready for the season?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Miami is in a situation where they'll surprise some people. They won't be surprising themselves, though. And I think that's the point here. They expect to have a certain level of excellence that maybe not everybody, as Terry is alluding to, is expecting from them. But they're going to be out there giving it their best shot as long as they can stay healthy, which is always the key for any Miami Heat run. But they know they can't be toiling around the 8th and 9th seed and playing games and all of that. They need to be making a strong stance here. And I have confidence that they will be a thorn in somebody's side. Hopefully not our Celtics, though.
Hopefully not. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Great conversation, Shaw, as always. Good stuff with NBA Media Day. You are a guiding light in the media ethos, my friend. Being able to be a fly on the wall and listening in on what's going on, and being there as well too, capturing so much of what we wish we could be able to be there for during those quality moments. Before we end the show, obviously we'd be remiss if we didn't take time off to give our flowers on the passing of probably one of the great centers of our generation, Dikembe Mutombo. It was announced that he'd passed away. He lost his battle with brain cancer. Hall of Famer, no question. Shaw, 8-time All-Star, 3-time block champ, rookie, all-rookie, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, 6-time All-Defensive. Man, he was something to behold, and I even speak about that going as far back to his days playing, as a Georgetown Hoya. He was just such a great ambassador for the game of basketball, but for humanity in of itself. It's unfortunate that he won't be here to continue to fulfill the dreams that he had been able to provide for so many people, and for that to continue to keep going. But man, he was he was funny, very witty, very humble, and just a really cool individual. I remember we had the opportunity to meet Dikembe when we visited NBA All-Star Weekend. He would bring his family to the Sony booth. Had a couple of opportunities to sit and talk with him. I think we took some pictures with him as well too and stuff. He just larger than life type person, but his heart was so much bigger. And that's the one thing that I took away from him. He was so funny in those Geico commercials as well too.
Yeah.
He proved that, he proved, number one, that, you didn't always have to, speak perfect English per se. As an African, his presence of what he, showed people in the country, that there are African players who have the skill set to be able to play in the NBA. Just a really phenomenal man altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. I think extremely well said. A guy who was a defensive stalwart, but I think a better human being. And it's interesting. You bring up, the All-Star games where we saw him. I was digging through. I put something on Instagram. I even show it here if you're watching us here on YouTube. But I always made the joke back in 2010. But Dikembe made me look like his son. He was just an amazing individual. Smiled with us, talked with us, and we didn't know him from Adam. We were fledgling media members, I think, at that time. But he was just always so gracious in any interaction and one of the great ambassadors for the game. So I personally am going to, miss what he's been able to provide for the game that we love here in the NBA. But nobody's going to miss him more than obviously his family who's left behind. But somebody who I didn't always appreciate in the moment in terms of his playing career. Because he was an adversary for most of the teams that I rooted for, I think, at those times, and he was swatting shots and knowing to people, and it was like, hey, it was frustrating, but he was great. He was great, at that. A larger than life personality, even larger than his 7+ foot frame, and we're going to miss him dearly. Shout out to Dikembe Mutombo for the career, but the human being that he was first and foremost, and the legacy, the long-lasting legacy that he's left behind as a humanitarian.
Guys like Luol Deng, Joel Embiid, they have an elevated platform now that can help move us forward. We may not talk about this now, Shaw, but the fact that a country like South Sudan has an opportunity to play in the Olympics because of a Dikembe Mutombo. I know his Georgetown brethren are going to, be missing him, and they obviously are going to speak on the loss of him. And again, this is a situation where he passed away well before his time. The last thing I'm going to say is this. October is breast cancer awareness month. Also, it's domestic violence awareness month. Specifically for cancer, I would just encourage all of our listeners who have family members, who have friends, whoever, this is an opportunity for you to make sure that you do what's necessary. Take advantage of the health benefits that you have. Get checked. Be proactive. Be diligent. Do your due diligence, because, like anything, you never know, right? You just never know. So there's a reason why the word awareness means something. And we're not saying that, with Dikembe that happened. He's been battling this fight with brain cancer for quite some time, but it's better to know than not know at all. And I think that's what will help us, continue to move forward and continue to be proactive, so that where those opportunities present themselves, we can have longevity, we can have sustainably longer lives than anticipated because of it. So just want to make sure, because I'm sure that's exactly what Dikembe was always advocating as well too, especially for Black men, that, make sure that you do what's necessary to help take care of yourselves, to be proactive, and to make sure that you're doing what's necessary to, to have a very healthy life for as long as you could possibly live it.
All right. I think great place to close. And we'll, sign off here on the baseline here with this closing graphic. Dikembe, we love you. We miss you. And we hope your family is going to be able to maintain and carry on the legacy that you've left on.